Good afternoon. Someone's being indicted, but I hope I can steal your attention for just a short period. So today we're continuing from 2 weeks ago when we talked about a demon-possessed man. When Jesus and the disciples got in the boat and went to the other side of the lake, and this just demonic man. Now it's interesting because Mark, the gospel that we're studying, that teaches you how to be a disciple. It's the shortest gospel because it gets right to the action of how we ought to be living as disciples, as followers of Christ. In the Gospel of Matthew, however, which is the teaching gospel, where you really, really want to know what Jesus is trying to teach you and you really want to learn of his teachings, and then Matthew, my favorite gospel, is where you want to go. And it has this story, and interesting enough, it tells the story that Jesus approached the other side of the lake and there were 2 demon-possessed individuals that approached him. Mark, and that's just kind of a summary because Matthew is focusing that entire story around the 2 verses that we're going to focus on today, where, 2 weeks ago we went through extensively about the demon-possessed man because this is teaching us how to be disciples. But Mark does mention what Matthew focuses on. And that's what we're going to focus on today. And the reason I wanted to separate the 2 from 2 weeks ago and today is because though we look at this as a miracle, and nothing is a miracle when Jesus is doing what he does because he is God and he's able to do any and everything. He walked upon the earth so that he too could experience what we were experiencing. But he is the one that walked upon the earth that had this experience, but he has the power to change our situations when we are experiencing these experiences. And so in this particular gospel, or this particular story, it's great. I mean, this man, we don't know how he got to that point. We made some suggestions. I made some suggestions last week as we're dealing with a lot of mental trauma and illness in America today, especially coming off of the pandemic. But here is the tragedy of this great story in these 2 verses. And it's something, we'll talk about that in a second. Let me just read the scriptures to you. So we're coming from Mark 5, only verses 14 through 17. So those who fed the swine, remember, I'm just going to recapitulate what we talked about last week. Last week we were talking about the demon-possessed man. And this man, whether you believe in demons or not, that was a heavily believed thing in the time of Jesus. Whether he believed in them, whether his apostles believed in it, none of that matters. What matters is the man that was demon-possessed believed that he was demon-possessed. So much so that he said, my name is Legion, which means that there are 6,000 to 10,000 of me's in me, and that he had no control over what he was saying. At times he spoke in the singular form, sometimes he spoke in the plural form. But the thing is that he believed in his head that he was demon-possessed. And in those particular times, it would take an act of God to remove a demon from an individual. There were some things that were said to be able to do that. If you could get the demon to admit his name, then that would take away his power. Everybody knew that if the demons got in water, they would drown and die. And so the whole thing that we're about to talk about today has a lot to do with that. And the fact is that Jesus healed the man. And Jesus is the one who is compassionate, who's sympathetic. And if you believe that a demon is in your head, then Jesus is going to take you where you are. And if that is where you are, he's going to deal with you as that is truth, in order to get you to a point where you believe that you're no longer demon-possessed, but you've been healed by him. And he knew that this man, because of the state he was, where he was living, what he was doing, that it would take something that he could see with his own eyes. He would have to see it to believe it. It wasn't enough just to say, you are healed, get up and walk, pick up your mat, or open your eyes, or any of the things that he said to the other people. It would take him being able to see that he was no longer demon-possessed. And how could a demon-possessed man see or feel that he was no longer demon-possessed? He would have to actually see the demon outside of him. And that is exactly what Jesus used the situation to do, so that this man would be convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was healed. And it just so happens that the demons inside of him were screeching and hollering, that it is said that the herd, the swine of pigs, heard the screeching and hollering and knew that there was a chance that these demons could come their way, and they decided to run and cast themselves off of the cliff and get into the water, because in that way the demons would die. So Jesus used that situation to be able to allow this man to see they're the demons. They're going down the hill and they've just drowned. They're no longer in you. There's been a lot of controversy about the fact that how could Jesus do something like this? Kill a swine. It's funny when you think about it, because the same people that are probably questioning that are not the people that are saying, I'm not going to eat this bacon or these pork sausages for breakfast because a pig had to have died in order for me to be able to indulge. So it's just sometimes we can be in ourselves, but that's not even the more important thing. So all of that is, some people believe that. There's just a lot when you talk about this particular scripture. Interesting enough, very seldom is the focus on the fact that this man that was living in the tombs and the caves, this man that was mentally out of his mind, had been saved and rescued, brought back to his sanity, clothed, because he was naked running around, he was clothed and in his right mind. No one seems to care that took place. The focus all around this story is all about the swine that died. Really. And so here's the thing, though, that we see that we can comment on, because it is in Scripture. And it says, those who fed the swine fled, and they told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that had happened. Then they came to Jesus and saw the one who had been demon-possessed and had the legion, sitting and clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who saw it told them how it happened to him who had been demon-possessed, and about the swine. Then they began to plead with him, Jesus, to depart from their region. Imagine that. So put it all together. So before we go pointing our fingers at these people, in your little bio clip there, or your little, what we're talking about today, I asked the question, do you have a do not disturb sign, I'm not interested, out for Jesus? What does that look like? It looks like exactly what these men did, because when it came to disturbing their prophets from the cell of the pigs, their comfort from having to not have to deal with people like this, it's like a do not go, leave our little town. Regardless of the power and the miraculous thing that happened that you're obviously capable of doing, we're not concerned about that. We're not concerned that this man who was out of his mind, and in the previous chapter we spoke about the fact that this is probably someone that ventured to the tombs, which was probably as close in proximity to his original life than not, because it says they had tried to bound him many times and he broke the chains apart. Which who would be trying to bound him? It would be his family and friends trying to calm him down, to get him back to normal, to take him back to his family and his environment. Maybe because I suggested that they were having to assume that responsibility and they were tired of assuming that responsibility. Maybe it was genuinely just out of concern and care, but the fact is that somebody was trying to intervene previously, and that's how they found that, you could not bind him. And so now they see this person that at one point in time they obviously cared about. Now he's in his right mind. Now you don't have to bind him. Now you don't have to worry. Now he's sitting here clothed in his right mind. He can go back to work. He can become a rightful citizen again. But not at the expense of us possibly losing more profits, like the ones that we've lost from the pigs that went and drowned themselves down in the water that we can no longer sell. So what does that look like in the 21st century? That looks like we have a hunger problem in the United States of America. That looks like we have a shelter problem in the United States. We have homeless people that we walk by every day. We have beggars that are on the corner that we want to tell them, no, I won't help you, but I'll help you get a job. What does that sound like? And so when you help them get a job, are you going to help them get a home so that they can afford to continue to go to their job in a timely fashion? Are you going to help them? How are you going to reintroduce them into society? You know, we often point our fingers and things, but most people in America are one paycheck from being homeless. A lot of people that are working are still at the food bank lines post-pandemic. And we look at that and we shake our heads and we have this heavy heart and we feel concerned and we want to give donations and we want to have fundraisers and we have all of this concern as long as we can do it in our level of comfort that we want to do it. Until we can do it, but it doesn't really affect us. Do you know how they say, you know, put your donations in? And where do people give and put their donations in? They give and put their donations in that disposable income that they have. And only to a certain degree, the disposable income after they've taken their recreational things and their toys and stuff out of that disposable income. But the minute that it starts to become what? Agape love, agape giving, that is sacrificial, then it's an entirely different story. And so it's not that strange or just, I can't believe that they wanted Jesus to leave town, because in essence, we do just that. We put a do not disturb sign on our doors when we have to think too hard about what we're doing. Yeah, we want to come and volunteer in the church on Saturday for the food bank. Yeah, let's be there and give the poor people a block of cheese. As long as it's not coming out of my paycheck. Volunteer, I'll even donate a couple of dollars, but if I have to consistently do that, especially to a point where it's going to matter in my wallet, it becomes an issue. Yes, we'll go down to the homeless shelter on the holidays and work in the soup kitchen and do all these things, but don't ask me to open up my basement. That's my what do they call it, the man cave room, the caveman room, where you just, you know, have your extra TV set up where you're watching your sports, your sports zone. You know, a couple of friends of mine have their basement set up as a flight simulator, the entire basement, you know. Work at the shelter, donate to the shelter, give to the shelter, but we're not taking anyone in. And this goes to the golden rule, because it's easy to do that. It's easy to work in the soup kitchen. It's easy to give a donation here and there. But the thing is it says, love your fellow man as you would want them to love you. And if you were homeless, you wouldn't necessarily care about someone coming to feed you at the homeless shelter. You would care that someone was opening their basement or extra room or garage room to you. And that is what that rule means. It says, do unto others. And so that is what Jesus expects of us, that we love others as ourselves. And this is exactly what this passage is that this man was out of his mind. Now he's in his right mind. And we ought to be happy about that at whatever cost it inquired to us. Because that is the golden rule. And that is so interesting, because that saddest part about that boils down to the one thing that predicates who we are as disciples. That is that the Bible says, God, what do you expect of man? And everybody's expecting this long theological thing, and it's just basically that we act justly, love mercy, and we humbly follow God. And in other words, we're loving our fellow man. We're loving God with all of our heart and soul. We're loving our fellow man the same. Every day our MO ought to be, at the end of the day, have I made a difference in someone else's life? That matters. And could I extend that difference to a point where it costs me something more than what it may have cost me? Some of us do a lot for others, but where do we draw the line? And as far as Jesus is concerned, there are no lines to be drawn. You know, we think that life owes us something. You know, I was talking to someone the other day. Life owes us nothing. We owe Jesus everything. And so what does this have to do with Jesus and us owing him everything? It's because he commands us. The royal command to love. And so that is the tragedy of that entire story, is that at the end of the day, we care more about animals, we care more about ourselves, our comfort, where we're going in life, what we're going to attain in life, than we do about others. I hear it all the time. And if we had a little longer, because I don't want to over complicate it, because it's a very simple end, 2 scriptures just kind of tucked in here, because that story doesn't end there. They go on and get back in the boat. And so just tucked in there, though, is where you find the real meaning of what Jesus is trying to convey here. And we tend to ignore that. But that looks like a whole lot of things. You know, it looks like people that often say, oh, you know, people sometimes tell me that you like to go to funerals. I don't like to go to funerals. But we do these things, and the thing I think that people would come to these things more is if they didn't interfere with them having to take sick leave. Because I am not going to take sick leave to go and comfort someone or be an encouragement to an individual during their time of bereavement, when that sick leave may cost me my vacation at Martha's Vineyard or Virginia Beach or wherever it is that you go. Do you know? And so those are the things, and it's the same thing with serving. You know, people are not going to do those things that are going to inconvenience them. They don't mind serving, they don't mind helping in the church, as long as it does not inconvenience them. And what does that mean? As long as it's convenient. As long as it's on Sunday morning when they're going to church anyway. As long as it's on Saturday afternoon when they've just dropped their kids off anyway. But don't ask them to do that in sacrifice or in lieu of doing that thing that they really want to do. And it goes on and on and on. I mean, you could pick a million things, and it boils right back down to they asked Jesus to leave. And every time we decide that we're going to be more concerned about our comfort, our profits, our well-being than our fellow man, we are doing the same thing. We're putting a do not disturb me sign in front of the Jesus that's knocking on our door. And if we wonder why our lives are chaotic, if we wonder why things are going on, then that has a lot to do with it. And so that's a question that we need to ask ourselves. It's a question I have to ask my own self. And that is, how sacrificial are we? Sacrificial are we in our giving, in our loving, in our concern for our fellow man? Where's that line drawn? What's your tipping point? What is, it's okay as long as it's not here. I want them to have homes, but not in my neighborhood. I want them to eat, but not if it's going to keep me from being able to dine out on the weekends. It's coming from my disposable income. I've seen a lot of selfishness here lately, and I was just having a conversation with someone. I always having conversations with people. I just had a conversation with someone yesterday about the fact that I believe that the worst sin is the sin of ingratitude. And we've just gotten to a point where we just, you know, you can call it a lack of manners, you can call it a lack of training, you can do whatever, but it's not something that's going to go away. Just because you're a young person, you're going to end up being that adult that doesn't know how to say, you know, Pastor Streeter always says, you know, folks don't have to be kind to you. The least you can do is say thank you. And that, as simple and sound as that sounds, it is just amazing how we have come to a point in life where we have no manners. You know, as your grandma would say, boy, where are your manners? My grandparents, my parents would have smacked me upside my head if someone would have given me something or done something for me, and I didn't immediately offer gratitude, send a note of thanks or something. And then the thing that makes it so bad is we're making excuses for the behavior of our children, for the behavior of our parents or our loved ones or whoever. We're making excuses. And then it just gets to a point where it's just like a disease. It's like, you know, it just spreads. And then your whole community is like that, and we don't even recognize, you know? As your grandmother used to say, boy, you don't even know you stink, you know? And so we look at this passage, we look at other passages, some of the things that Peter did, and the passages are there to hold a mirror to us. But we just have to break them down so that we can see what the real point is. And the real point is there is that Jesus is here doing this wonderful thing for man, for the love of man, out of compassion. And we don't see that because we are so into seeing what we want to see in our lives. We want to see more wealth. We want to see more serenity. We want to see more, people say, I don't want folks here. Well, I tell people my home is your home. Come, sit, have some coffee, some tea. And so this passage is something I think would be a good starting point in terms of changing things around in our life. And so we talk about changing things around in our life. Everybody has a sweet tooth. And if you have a sweet tooth like I have a sweet tooth, that is one thing that I believe I have genetically. My father has an awful sweet tooth, but he was always able to balance it out. He always ate plenty of fruits and vegetables. But as you go into healthier things, there's such an easy way to do it, and we're just going to do that right now. I just pulled some things, and so when we talk about a sweet tooth, what satisfies a sweet tooth? Did you know that one of the sweetest foods on the planet is the date? The date. And the date is filled with minerals, copper, magnesium, iron. It has a lot of good stuff in it, but it's also one of the sweetest things on the planet. And then it's biblical. It's talked about in the Bible in a good sense in many, 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 many scriptures. So we take something sweet because we're trying to satisfy a sweet tooth. So we start with the sweet things. We start with dates. Raisins are a close second. I mean, raisins, dates, basically they're synonymous like apples and pears, oranges and lemons, ice cream and cake. And then we have cranberries. So just to give it a different texture, cranberries. Then you start working some magic. When you're trying to do raw recipes, this is just a little bit of background information. If you want something that's just going to be sweet, 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 I always tell people you can take maple syrup, mix it with raw shredded coconut, and it's going to be like sugar, honestly. And then, for those who have a sweet tooth, typically you have a sweet chocolate tooth as well. And so then you can take the maple syrup and the coconut and add raw carob powder, which comes from the carob bean, which is basically just like chocolate. And so there you get your really, really good, healthy chocolate thing. And so these are just some tips for you. So those, and that's all you really need to know. Because honestly, you can just take that and take the date, and then you can take, I've actually grinded down walnuts here, but you can, almonds. You can take a whole almond or a pecan or any kind of nut that you want to take, and simply take a date and remove the seed. If they're medjool dates, if they're decidual dates, they won't have a seed in them. And then just replace the seed with a nut. And then you can dip that in that maple syrup with coconut and or the carob, and it's just like eating a Snickers bar, honestly. It gives you the same chocolatey kind of thing going on. So it's really simple. So if you have a child in the house and you just want to satisfy that thing instead of giving them a Snickers bar, that's exactly what you can do. And not only are you satisfying the sweet tooth, but you're giving them a ton of nutrients and things that are going to move their bowels at the same time. Minerals, vitamins, all that good stuff. And then if you really have kids that just love to eat lots of it, then you take the batter that I'm doing, and we might do that, is you add some grounded flax seeds. That's a trick way of always, getting things to come out better. It's just adding a few grounded flax seeds to something. So we're going to start with, we have all of the sweet things that we have. And you can use some of them or all of them. You can use raisins and cranberries and dates and coconut, or one or none of them. Well, at least one of them. Because we're making oatmeal raisin cookies. And so when you think of oatmeal raisin cookies, what makes the oatmeal raisin cookie? The oatmeal. The oatmeal. And that's another thing for people that are struggling with inflammation. You've got finger, joints, pain, knee pain. Then you just basically need to reduce the inflammation. Oats. What else are we going to use? Cinnamon we're going to use as a sweetener. That and apples. All of these are anti-inflammatory foods. So we've got to head up. And the almonds. So I picked 6 anti-inflammatory ingredients to go in with the other 4 or 5. You can use some of them, all of them, or none. And that's what I'm going to teach you today, is that I love raw oatmeal cookies. And sometimes it just depends on what I have. If I've got these 2 bananas that are pretty much just about ripe and they need to be consumed, and I'm having watermelon all week, I don't want them to go to waste, so I'm going to throw them into the cookie batch. I have a ton of them already frozen to make banana ice cream, so I don't need any more in the freezer. So I'm going to throw them into the batch. I have these Honey Crisp apples that when I went to get some raw orange juice from Wegmans, I decided to grab a bag of organic Honey Crisp apples, and when the lady gave me I was like, I just paid $12 for some apples. So it's about $2 an apple, so I figured we will put them in the recipe. Okay, I should get some from the farmer's market next weekend. And so this is basically all that we need. I mean, these are simple, easy ingredients. The only thing I did to reduce the time was to take the steel-cut oats. You can use steel-cut oats, or you can soak and sprout wheat berries. This was the easiest thing. Steel-cut oats and grind them down to a powder. I took almonds and put them into the blender and just grinded them down, but such that it has a little texture left. And these are cashews that I put into the blender as well to make it into a silky cashew powder. So when you grind cashews down, unlike almonds and walnuts and pecans, it has more of a very silky-like texture to it. And we're going to use that to emulsify all of the ingredients when we put them together. We're just going to roll them around in the cashew flour so that they can take on their shape and form, and then we can place them onto the dehydrator. So these are all the ingredients you need. We're using a little cinnamon. I couldn't find the nutmeg, so if you have cinnamon, you may want to mix it in with a little nutmeg and or not. We have the bananas. Again, that's going to make, if you're looking for a chunky cookie that's got a little bit more texture, a little bit more crunchier after it's been dehydrated, you probably wouldn't go with the very ripe bananas. The apples, we're going to grind them up really quickly in this little tabletop grinder just to give the cookies a little bit of a sweetness since they're Honey Crisp and a little bit more texture. We have a little vanilla that we can add. Typically, I would throw in a little maple syrup. I am out of maple syrup, so we're going to use a little raw honey and or some blackstrap molasses. I'm going to see how it looks once we start to blend it all together. So those are the ingredients. I'll post the picture so that you will remember. And this is just how easy it is. We just take the huge bowl that you have. I use my largest bowl because it doesn't make sense. We're going to put these on the dehydrator for 5 to 7 hours. And it depends. They never usually stay that long. You can start eating them probably 3 hours after you put them on. As soon as they start, for a little bit of the moisture to get out, you just, you can just kind of put it in your mouth and chew it. You're good to go. You can eat them completely raw dough. You don't ever have to put them on the dehydrator if you don't want to. But if you want it to be more like a cookie, then we would suggest that. But because they have to stay on the dehydrator 5 to 7 hours, you always make kind of a lot. So that's about 3-4 cups. Remember, I say we don't usually use measurements, but I have proportions. So I have about the same amount of shredded almonds that I have for my main ingredient, which is steel-cut oats, which is basically going to be suffices our oatmeal. And it doesn't matter which order you put these ingredients in, so we can just start dabbing some stuff in. We'll put, we'll use all of the almond thing. Now, people always ask me, when I'm grinding things, about that. So, especially flax seeds. So, flax seeds, almonds, all of these things, once you start to grind them, you're taking them away from the wholeness. And you don't want it to sit like that for too long. Things can become rancid, especially during temperatures like this, humidity, moisture in the air. I don't use air conditioning, so I'm really good not to do that because you start to create humidity and then you can start to create bacteria. So you just kind of want to be careful. We're going to use all of this coconut. I'm just going to dump everything in. We're going to use, I love cranberries in my my oatmeal cookies. We'll throw the raisins. I have some currants in there as well. And then you want to be careful about how many dates you use, because you have to chop them up, and you can't really shred dates too fine, and then they can end up being like half of the cookie. So how many ingredients was that? We had steel cut oats, we had the almonds, we have raisins, we have cranberries, we have dates, and I think that was 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to throw the cinnamon in. So we're just putting, this is what makes this recipe particularly easy. When you're doing some of the other raw recipes, sometimes, but not really, it may matter just a tad bit the way in which you put your ingredients in. I've already washed my expensive apples. So all we're going to do, this is the only thing that I'm having to show you. We're just going to cut this into a few pieces. Now mind you, if I was using my larger food processor, I would have simply split that thing down the middle, removed the seeds, and we would have been good to go. But I'm going to chop this up a little more. This is a powerful little thing. For those of you who don't have a food processor and you want to kind of do a lot of these, this Cuisinart little 4-cup tabletop thing is very convenient. When I don't feel like pulling the large one out, this thing can be, it's like I call it the little mighty mo. I used to have another one that was made, I can't remember who it was by, but I liked it better. But this is a close second. And we're just going to grind that down. But it doesn't matter if you don't grind it all the way, because it's a raw apple, so you end up having a raw apple cookie. So you just want to get it where it's... And the thing about the Honeycrisp apples, unlike Gala or Fuji, or what I normally put in recipes, but I was just like, wow, dollars for these apples. And Honeycrisp does have a nice taste to it. So we're going to do 2. We're going to put both of them in. And you see how simple it is to just make stuff? So easy. This apple seems a little dry. That is not tasting like a $2 apple. No. It's okay. I was at the market this past weekend and I needed apples for my carrot apple ginger juice. I'm looking at the apples and I'm asking Mr. Miller, where did these come from? It looks like they are conventional apples out of the store. He's such a businessman, though. I often overhear him talking to other people when they're like, $4 for whatever. He's like, ma'am, those are the best, whatever. And I asked him about the apples. He did not answer my question about where they came from. He was like, ma'am, feel free to eat the apple right now and see if you like it. And I got them, and they were about as, that's it. All you can do is eat them in some, I ate one, and it just wasn't good. I think I was on Queen McKenzie's site, a page the other day when she was showing some pictures of her garden. And I was just telling her the same thing, that the food industry has, like the swine went down that hill very quickly, torpedo rate, such is the food in America. It's a shame that nothing is good anymore. It's just a hot mess. So we put that in, and that pretty much becomes our batter. So we just kind of mix it all in together. See, the thing about the apple is that if you were making cookies, I guess you would have butter, I guess you would have a little milk and egg, and so that's what your apples and the banana are going to do. It's just to kind of blend it all together, get it wet and moist. You don't have to do that. But it just helps, and it gives it more flavor, gives it more texture. So we're gonna try this. This banana is probably not as ripe as I would want it to be for something like this, but just kind of break it into pieces. See how a ripe banana is much more pliable than an unripe banana. We're gonna use both of these. These are big bananas. I have the red bananas, but they're not as ripe as they should be just yet. So then you take this and probably mix it with your fingers. I'm going to do that. I'm going to add some grounded flaxseed. So you add the grounded flax seeds. It's not going to affect the flavor at all. They're kind of neutral. These are golden flax seeds, but it's going to take it to a different level in terms of the fiber content. So you make it like a laxative cookie. You know, when people come by, or when I give people things, they're like, they whisper to me, "Is this going to make me go to the bathroom right now, Dr. Sales?" I'd be like, "Yeah, you're going to poop all over your pants right now. You better get out of here." Nothing is ever going to make you like go that fast, especially if your system already has a whole bunch of other crap in it. You know, somebody that eats raw all the time, that's exactly what will happen. You know, before I finish eating my salads, most times I've got to get up and go to the bathroom. So we're going to put a little vanilla, just a tad bit. And that's a tad bit for the amount of... So I'm just on this black strap molasses thing here lately. And so since they're my cookies, I'm going to put a little black strap molasses, maybe kind of a lot. And I'm going to put a tad bit of raw honey. I don't like to put that back in the pantry when it hasn't been washed down. So put some raw honey in here. And you can tell this is going to be beyond sweet. Then I have some essential oil. Just use a couple of drops of wild orange and a couple of drops of wild lemon. This is just some added benefits with the really good properties that you find. And then they also act lemon as a natural preservative because we are putting the bananas in. And this is going to net me probably 4 dozen cookies, depending on how I shape them. It smells wonderful. And then you just keep mixing it. And it's so easy. So I had some peaches here. So ripe. They're so ready to eat. I got these Saturday. I had about 8. So I've got 4 left. I was going to do a peach pie. Then I've got some plums. So while we're here, you can take any of the, you can take the plums, wash them, cut them, and put them into the little tabletop grinder and start putting similar ingredients and just mix it all together. So you take all these plums, put them in. So now you've got like a plum mixture. And then you toss that into a bowl with chopped dates, nuts, and then a little coconut. And so you see how you make recipes? And or you do the same thing with the peaches. You can either grind them in the grinder or you can just make them into really chunky pieces. And then the very same ingredients that we added to this, including the still cut oats, you can just put it into a bowl, and that you don't have to dehydrate. You wouldn't add the bananas or the apple. You just use the fruit and then the sweeteners that we had over on the side. Probably not the raisins. I would probably stick with just the dates and the nuts and the oats. And that makes a nice little dish for dessert that takes 2 minutes, especially if the stuff is getting right where it needs to be consumed. So you can do that for dessert. You can have it for breakfast. You can have it for a post or pre-workout meal. I need to do this with my hands. I just don't feel like getting them all mushy. And so that's pretty much it. And then we'll put them on the dehydrator. I'll do a couple for you just so that you'll see. So when you're dealing with a recipe that does not have as much liquid in it, typically if I'm doing something and I have more liquid in it, then I will use the sheets. I might just put them on for a quick second and then you flip them off as you so. We take our hands and just mix this in because the bananas aren't mixed in as well as they should. So just take your fingers and work with it. I don't know if that camera can see this or not. But what we have on our hands is a wet mess, okay? So remember earlier I said what we're going to do, we do it two ways here. I think I probably put a little more of the blackstrap molasses in there than I wanted to. So now what we're going to start doing is you can apply some of the cashew powder to the mix itself just to begin to dry it out a bit. When I say dry it out, I mean such that it's not all really just a million little pieces on your hand, but enough so that you can start forming balls, and then we're going to roll that into some additional put this over on the side, and we're going to make a ball. And of course, the thicker you make the ball, the longer it's going to take to dehydrate. And yes, so since this is a little wetter with the blackstrap molasses, then it's good that you do use your sheet. And then you do the same thing. Start out with a little bit, put a little cashew powder. That's a really good trick. I don't have a tip bowl that you can get to, but you cash at me. Are we going overboard with Cash App? That's a whole nother lecture. You know, one more person gives me their Cash App for their child coming out of kindergarten or whatever. I'm like, what is going on in America? So this is pretty much going to be a sticky, fun mess for a few minutes. And I won't bore you with that, but I just wanted you to see a couple of tricks, just in case you are trying this at home and you went overboard with the molasses, because molasses kind of has the same texture as the blackstrap molasses. Maple syrup, I mean, has the same texture as the blackstrap molasses. So when you get yourself into raw food preparation, sometimes things can go south if you have some watercress or something that you're using and something becomes a little damper than you want it to be. There are a bunch of tricks to the trade, but when you start dealing with sweet stuff, cashew powder acts as a great emulsifier. If I was thinking, I would have put some lecithin granules in this as well to give it more of like a soft feeling. But yeah, as long as you've got some stuff that you can play with. And even if I didn't have the raw cashew flour silk down, we still could have just dumped them on like in big chunks. And then after an hour or so on a dehydrator, you just flatten it out and it would be fine. So we'll take a view of that. I'm just going to pull some of this dough off my fingers. And this is about as messy as the recipe gets, you know. No scrubbing, look at that. We basically just have to rinse out these bowls and then clean up this a snap. The only problem is that you can't eat your cookies immediately. That's why you should always have some on hand, so that when you run out, you've already got some being in the dehydrator. Bread, my raw bread, the raw carrot bread. You know, you juice carrots every day, so you make that bread. I love it. It's my favorite. I just get mad when I don't have any. So versatile in terms of what you can do with it. Slice an avocado, eat it on it, make some raw cheese, have it on there. I made some great raw tuna, carrot tuna, for some guests recently. Whoa! So there are the cookies. And that's it. So that's another recipe for you. Do an oatmeal raisin. I put the grounded flaxseed flour in, but I have a flaxseed cookie recipe with walnuts and green apples, flax seeds, whole flax seeds, and grounded flax seeds, and maple syrup. That's pretty much, and coconut. Those are the 5 ingredients, and you just blend it all together, mix it in, and it makes a fabulous cookie. And so much so you can use it as like a sweet cracker if you wanted to as well. But that's it. I hope that's been helpful. I'm going to finish putting these on here so that I can enjoy them probably late this evening, definitely tomorrow. But please, take a survey of your life and how you are with treating other people and your goodwill aspects of your life, your charitable aspects. And just, put it to the test and see, are you just doing what's comfortable for you? Or are you willing to go beyond to benefit someone else? And that's what Jesus wants us to do. He wants us to do that. So let's try to do that. See you in 2 weeks.